Hello, Ben.
Hi.
You've heard of
Hi.
Thunderbirds?
Thunderbirds, what's that?
Yeah, I know, no idea. Well, they have this thing in there called Operation Cover Up.
Yes.
When the portraits change, when someone comes to visit the island. It's very good. It's a favorite bit of mine. And I was wondering, what would be your Operation Cover Up portrait pose? Because, we get John Tracy, arms folded, looking very cool. Virgil, puffing on a cigar, I believe, in his, no, it might just be a cigarette, actually. But what would be your Operation Cover Up pose if you wanted to look inconspicuous in a photograph?
I mean, my go-to is the sort of Burt Reynolds where I'm laying down, with my head resting on my arm like that. So I think I might go for something of that nature.
Yes, and people would look at that portrait and go, "Hey, there is a handsome man up there. I'm sure he doesn't work with international rescue whatsoever.
He definitely has never rescued anybody."
Yeah. I wonder, this is semi-related to Operation Cover Up. When visitors come to the island, do they ever look at the portrait of Lady Penelope and think, "Jeff, why? Why have you got a picture?
Who's that?
So your 5 sons here, and then there's this one woman. Who is that? Why do you have a massive portrait of her hanging up on the wall?
Are there any pictures of his wife anywhere around?
No,
just Penny. Not suspicious at all.
Yeah. Well, maybe that does it all. Anyway,
well, are you ready?
Welcome to the Security Hazard Show. What are you...
Parker, fetch the Rolls Royce. We're going for a little podcast.
A little podcast. Oh, lovely. Oh, very nice. Very classy. Yes. Ben put his pearls on.
Had to get the pearls out.
Yeah. Just for that. Well, thank you.
Just for that intro that I completely did not warn you was coming.
No, exactly. I just dived in. I went straight ahead anyway. Oh, dear, everyone. Well, I had a prepared intro, which was welcome to the Security Hazard Show. The podcast, it doesn't feel fitting now, but I was going to say the podcast so disgraceful, but Ben was clearly much classier than I was prepared for there. But I was going to say the podcast so disgraceful that Shane Weston has asked us to give back our most special podcast badge.
Ooh. Yeah. And who's your host? Well, he's called Jack Knoll, and he'll be with you as soon as his body is finished being waxed and polished. Oh, and if you get that reference, then you're definitely in the right podcast.
You are in the right podcast, specifically this week. In response to that, I say that some say he used to live in Four Feather Falls, but he moved out because the Wi-Fi wasn't very good. It's Ben Wolf Page, everyone. And you are in a new location today, that feels fitting.
Where the Wi-Fi is not the greatest.
Oh, well, hopefully it lasts for the duration of this show regardless, because we're very happy to have you here. Thank you, everyone who is tuning in live with us today.
How the Wi-Fi does today? I think it'll be fine.
I think it'll be fine. Very good acting. Very good.
It's so early in the show and it's already out of control.
Yeah. Well, that's us. That's the Security Hazard Show, everyone. That's what you come here for. That's what you want, isn't it?
Wait, what have people actually come here for today, Jack?
What have people actually come here for today? Well, we've got a particularly exciting segment planned. When I was thinking about this, I was like, I'm kind of excited to do this because I don't know what the response is going to be. We are playing a War of Nerves segment today, which is when Ben and I debate. We go head to head. We each pick a side of an argument and we argue for it, and we decide the victor at the end of it.
Mm.
Sometimes we decide the victor. Sometimes, to be honest, we're a bit, wishy-washy about the whole thing. But I think today we're probably going to come down on a firm decision either way, because we are talking about two Rolls Royces, FAB 1 from Thunderbirds and HUDSON from Terrahawks. We're just going to discuss which we prefer. I am going to be arguing the case for HUDSON from Terrahawks, and Ben, you are on the side of FAB 1 from Thunderbirds.
Right.
So we're going to weigh it up. We're going to take a look at both sides. We're going to discuss some of our favorite moments. We're going to discuss aspects of the design. We're also going to go into a little bit of the history of Gerry Anderson and Rolls Royce, because there's some really interesting biographical tidbits in there that we wanted to kind of pull out. So there we go. So without further ado, let's get started with our little war of nerves. Right. So, Rolls Royce, very, very nice cars. Would you agree? Generally speaking, do you like a Rolls Royce, Ben?
Oh yeah, it's a.
Have you ever owned a Rolls Royce?
I have never owned a Rolls Royce. I've sat in one though in a junkyard. It was a very old Rolls Royce.
Wow.
And I was
I've never had that pleasure, but I'm
just gonna hop in and see what it's like. And it was, about as classy as sitting in any other car in a junkyard, but it, perhaps a bit more comfy.
A bit more comfy. Okay, well, good. Well, basically, it's interesting because the relationship between Gerry Anderson and Rolls Royce kind of was a bit of a constant throughout his life, and I just wanted to call up some sections from the Gerry Anderson authorized biography. This is the Simon Archer and Marcus Hearn later edition of the book. Fantastic book, by the way. One of the essentials, I think. Would you agree with that, Ben?
Absolutely,
if you're a Gerry Anderson fan, you should pick up this book because it is full of insights that you won't get anywhere else. I think that's fair to say.
Absolutely.
I wanted to pull up kind of some sections about Rolls Royce. I've actually found three little interesting items in there. So we, in terms of Gerry's life story, we know he grew up in poverty, and much of his journey towards being a filmmaker was just about getting out of poverty, and that was kind of an important life journey for him to take. And one of I should just start by reading this section. So this is sort of just after Lou Grade bought AP Films, so we're talking 5XL5 Stingray era, and suddenly he'd come into all this money, and Gerry had his eye on some cars. First of all, he bought the Jaguar Mark 10, which was the car he bought as soon as the sale to Lou Grade was sort of in the works. He was like, right, I'm going to reserve a Jaguar Mark 10. And the story goes that the sale process took a little bit longer, and Gerry was starting to get a bit nervous about, will I have to pay for this car before I actually have the money kind of situation, which I think some of us can make.
Bit of a National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation swimming pool. If you know that.
Very similar sort of scenario. Yeah. I can picture that quite vividly, actually. Yeah. But anyway, so as far as Rolls Royce is concerned, because we're not talking about Jaguars here, we're talking about Rolls Royce. From the very start of Gerry's motoring career, his ambition was to own a Rolls Royce, ideally a Silver Cloud. When the Rolls Royce Silver Shadow came on the market, Gerry was unimpressed. I thought the Shadow looked horrendous. To me, it didn't look like a Rolls. It looked just like any other car. Anyway, by then, I had decided to buy the car I had always wanted. Calling at Lou Grade's office for another of their early morning meetings, Gerry noticed that Grade appeared in a hurry, rushing through their informal agenda and pointedly telling Gerry to finish his coffee. Getting up from his
What's going
chair,
on,
he
Luke?
pointed to the lift and said, "Quick, I've got something to show you." Gerry followed Gray down to the basement car park. We walked into the garage where I had parked my car, and there was this brand new navy blue gleaming Rolls Royce, recalls Gerry. "There you are. It's yours." Gray smiled as he handed Gerry the keys. Gerry looked at the car, and his heart sank. It was a Silver Shadow.
Ah.
Concerned by Gerry's strangely blank reaction, Gray asked, "Is anything wrong? Don't you like the colour?" Afraid of appearing churlish, Gerry forced a smile and said, "No, it's wonderful." Within minutes of making himself comfortable in the car and starting his journey back to Slough, Gerry had forgotten his qualms about the generous gift and was completely won over. So
really? Wow.
So that's the story
great.
of Gerry's first Rolls Royce. Initial disappointment.
Mm-hmm.
But then quickly realised, you know what? It's actually quite nice to be given a Rolls Royce, really, isn't it?
I wouldn't know.
It's quite nice.
Never had that experience.
Well, when not Lou Grade, because he's no longer with us, but when Michael Grade comes to the security hazard show and goes, "You know what? I want to buy your podcast." maybe, just maybe we'll get lucky.
It's fingers crossed. Knock on wood.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's a great story and very telling of Gerry's early, up and coming life story and how he came from poverty. And I'm sure that Rolls Royce symbol was very important to him.
Yeah. Absolutely.
As representing his journey.
And I won't read it in full, but there's a section later on when Gerry's fortunes kind of took a downturn, sort of after Space 1999, and sort of having to try and build himself back up again as a filmmaker. He had to sell the car that had been gifted to him by Lou Grade, and on his way to the dealer to sell the Rolls Royce, he scraped the car along the garage door and considerably lowered the value as he was doing that. And he had to swap his Rolls Royce because
for a Jaguar?
No, for a Mini.
A Mini? Oh.
Yeah. Oh, poor guy. Definite, but I like it. I do like a Mini. I nothing wrong with that. But switching from a Rolls Royce to a Mini must have been quite a status really downgrade. And it's funny him, scraping his car on the way to on his way to the dealer. An act of self-sabotage, maybe. I think. But then it actually didn't take too long, relatively speaking. It didn't take too long for his fortunes to go back up again, because when they came to make Terrahawks, and the character of Hudson was introduced, and there's a few interesting stories here related to Rolls Royce, but I just wanted to point out the fact that Gerry met with Rolls Royce representatives to arrange his return to the ranks of a Rolls owner. Rolls Royce recognized that it was good publicity for Gerry Anderson to own a Rolls Royce, so they gave him one on a loan, and they also gave one to Christopher Burr, who was also a producer of Terrahawks. So they had matching rollers. Isn't that lovely?
That is charming.
Very charming.
I think both those cars appear in a Terrahawks documentary, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, you could be right there.
They did a little stunt where they filmed them pulling into the studio together, and they go through in their Rolls Royces past the gate at Bray Studios, pull up to the offices, get out, and walk to the door together. And Gerry, in a very staged manner, turns to Christopher Burr and says, "The traffic was murder today." And Christopher's just very confused, and he's like, "Oh yeah, the traffic bad, not good today." Just they sort of awkwardly fumble, and then they go in the door.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful bit of, definitely seek that out. I think it's on the Gerry Anderson YouTube channel, if I'm not mistaken. If not, it's on the Terrahawks Blu-rays.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. Yeah, but there you go. That's sort of interesting to sort of chart Gerry's successes with his ownership of Rolls Royces. And also when they do and don't turn up in various shows.
Right.
It's worth mentioning Gerry's own Rolls Royce does turn up in the Protectors. Am I right in thinking that?
Protectors? Yep.
Yeah. Like it's there in the opening titles or something like that. So,
Yep.
Yeah, clearly not someone who was ashamed of showing off his nice car on screen. If he was in that documentary as well, then yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
But
there's a lot of the crew's cars turn up in the Protectors, like the Jensen Interceptor that Harry Rule drives in the Protectors. It actually belonged to Reg Hill.
Right. Well, we know Reg Hill liked his cars as well. Reg Hill's Mercedes turns up in Secret Service as well.
Yes.
In
the Protectors. So there's quite a few crew cars that have turned up.
There are. Yeah, which is lovely. It's nice to have those little personal connections in there. But as far as fictional Rolls Royces are concerned,
let's get into it.
Is that the plural of Rolls Royces?
I think it's Royce's Rolls, actually.
Royce's Rolls, of course. Yeah,
as Sheriff Bull would say.
Lovely. Well, anyway, the main one, the one that everyone remembers, let's be honest, is Fab 1. And Ben, you are taking that side of the debate. So I'm going to let you state your opening case for why Fab 1 is the best Rolls Royce out of the two.
Well, I mean, obviously you've said it right there. Fab 1 is absolutely iconic. It is sort of arguably the definitive Rolls Royce in all of film and television. I mean, I can't think of a more memorable one. Can you? I mean,
certainly that's not called out as prominently as it is. They do make a point of Fab 1 is a Rolls Royce. Like they're very, very clear about that. That is the image that they want you to associate. Yeah, definitely.
Yes. It's unforgettable, bright shade of pink. It's got more gadgets than a James Bond car. It actually feels like they've taken a James Bond style car, like the famous Aston Martin from Goldfinger, I think is the one where that debuts.
Yep.
Yeah, and they've taken it and put it on steroids, not just metaphorically. Of course, it is metaphorically as well, because there's so many weapons and gadgets on Fab 1. I mean, harpoons, oil slick, machine guns rear facing and front facing, loudspeakers, tracking, all kinds of gadgets out the wazoo. Way more than a James Bond car, and it's also way bigger than a James Bond car. So
how big are we talking?
21 feet in length, 8 feet wide. So that's chunky. You think about
not good for British roads whatsoever.
Yeah, it is. That is a point I have to concede right away, that it's a bit big for a country drive. If you're going down the road, you're probably going to have to get over into the ditch, but you're in Fab 1, so you're basically indestructible.
And I suppose in the Thunderbirds world, the roads are all wider anyway, and there's hardly any traffic. There's like never any traffic in Thunderbirds.
True.
When there is, there's a point made about it. But there's certainly impractical would be the word I would use.
There is an element too of since Lady Penelope is sort of an undercover agent at times, she has to, be a bit incognito. Her pink Rolls Royce doesn't lend itself well to that mission because it's highly conspicuous.
True,
but
I don't know why I'm arguing the for again, but it's so inconspicuous that you wouldn't suspect it.
It's so conspicuous you wouldn't suspect it.
Yes.
It's so noticeable you don't notice it. Yeah. It's yeah, there is an element of that, and of course, Lady Penelope, a bit like Kate Kestrel, is a public figure in the world of the show. So Fab 1 sort of plays into her persona, her public persona. Yeah. But then it like Hudson, it has kind of a secret life where it has all these gadgets and tricks, hydrofoils, the ability to travel across water, so on and so forth.
Yes.
Lots of fun features to talk about.
Here's a random tangent for you, but I want to get your opinion on this.
Right,
obviously, Fab 1 flying.
Obviously,
it only happens in a dream sequence in the Thunderbirds I'll Go movie. But then in the live action movie and in the 2015 revival series, it flies. What's your take on that, Ben?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think as a kid watching it, I kind of wondered why it didn't, because it does like everything else. It's basically Supercar, only Lady Penelope's style of Supercar. So, and Supercar, as we all know, flew quite a bit, even into space.
Yes.
So
more flying than anything else, really. It was basically a plane. Yeah.
So I think I wondered as a kid why it didn't fly.
Right.
Particularly after watching Thunderbirds Go. So I'm not opposed to later versions coming along and adding the flight feature. I don't think that's a bad addition at all. It feels fitting with the original vision of
I
Derek
suppose so. I think of Lady Penelope as a character, and I don't see her sitting in the back of a small little, relatively small aircraft. Once you turn Fab 1 into an aircraft, it's quite small. It's going to bump them out all over the place and just be...
Sure.
I much prefer the image of her in Fab, like in The Imposters, where she drives up in Fab 1, parks the car underneath Fire Flash, and Fire Flash, it gets lifted. The car gets lifted up into the cargo bay, and then she can go and sit in the cocktail lounge aboard Fire Flash, have a drink, ride in comfort, and then when she gets there, they unload the car, and she's ready to go again.
A little bit more elegance and charm, and a little bit less deadly danger.
Deadly danger. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that would be my thoughts on that. I understand from a storytelling point of view, if you want to get Penelope more involved in the action, then I can understand why you would make it fly. But I don't know if I want Penelope more involved in the action. I like that she has that degree of separation there, where you can do something slightly different with her character.
Right.
So, yeah.
Certainly,
like sort of
it feels
limitation there.
Would feel weird to have her involved in the rescue directly, whilst in Fab 1 flying along. It just doesn't. It's not her function in the show. She goes off on investigative missions.
Yeah,
rather than participating in the rescue.
More subtlety, a little bit.
Yes, more undercover, more sneaky, more espionage, more spy-fi.
Yeah, definitely. What about what about the design of Fab 1? I mean, let's talk about the pinkness of it.
What do you are we asking, like, do we like the pinkness?
Do we like the pinkness?
I am not opposed to the pinkness, I have to say.
I mean, it's
as
so
a child, it's
important.
pretty typical for boys to kind of be like, ew, pink. You're sort of like brought up that way in a certain background. Of which
that's
I was
true.
a part.
That's true.
So I was discouraged from liking pink as a boy, and then you hit a certain age, and you're like, you know what, pink is great. It's a great color. It's I'm not opposed to it. Would I drive around in a car like that myself? It's not really my style. I think they came out with speaking of Jaguar, as we were talking about it earlier. They came out with one that was all pink a couple of years ago.
All right.
And there was a huge internet reaction to how intensely pink it was. Right. I think it's a bit strong. It makes a big statement, but Fab 1 is a big car. So, you've got to go sort of all the way to drive Fab 1. And if you're going to go all the way, you might as well lean into the hot pink. I think that's probably the right choice. Yeah. And it's like so many of Sylvia Anderson's design choices, because allegedly Sylvia Anderson was the one who chose pink as the color of Fab 1. Okay. Can you confirm or deny that? I don't know that.
I don't know. Actually don't know either way, but I can imagine it fitting with her kind of wanting to come up with a Lady Penelope brand. You need to pick a color. Pink makes a lot of sense in that.
She was really good at picking distinctive choices that are memorable and stick with the audience, and that's definitely the choice with Fab 1. It's part of why it's so memorable is the color. So I'm not opposed to the color. The shape of it is a bit. I think Derek Meddings has talked about how the car has a lot of straight lines. It's somewhat boxy in some ways, which is something he said in an interview that subsequently he realized cars rarely ever have straight lines. They tend to be more curved, both for aerodynamics and for style. So they very rarely have a straight line in the way that Fab 1 does.
Yeah.
I think that sort of naivete that he approached, or that he added to that by making it a bit more boxy and angular, sort of lends it a unique look. Like, it doesn't look at all. If you think about something comparable like the 60s Batman Batmobile, which has a lot of swoops and curves and fins, this is much more boxy than that. And that sort of gives it an almost tank-like quality, where it's, I mean, if you've seen things like the Skeletric Fab 1 that came out recently, very... I can't
reach it from here, but I do have one.
very, very chunky, very boxy, one of the largest cars they've ever designed for Skeletric, I believe.
There you go.
So it's, look at that. It's a tank. It's quite a machine.
Really is. And it's particularly noticeable when they built the real Fab 1, which is a whole story in itself that we don't even have time to get into here. But that car was massive and unwieldy and just really... It's funny how blowing it up to full size emphasizes the... It sounds stupid to say it, but emphasizes the size of it.
Yeah, well, when you see it with the puppets, the scale of the world is a little bit fuzzy, because things, as we know in Thunderbirds, the size of objects changes depending on which model they're using, and they're sometimes inconsistent about scale when they were making Thunderbirds. So when you see it, in person or next to people in a real life mock-up, it definitely does emphasize the size, as you say. Yeah, I think it would probably run over Hudson. I don't think Hudson would stand a chance against this thing in a battle.
Well, let's talk about Hudson then.
Yeah, let's talk about Hudson.
Design.
Tell me about Hudson. There's a few important points about Hudson that you should mention.
There are some really key points, and what I actually, again, I'm all about the books this week. I've got my Terrahawks annual from the 80s right here.
So beautiful.
And there is a page on Hudson, which is called Hudson, Einstein's Roller. And it actually summarizes the key points, because Hudson is a really special car. In fact, it's more than a car. It is a character in the show itself, because one of the most distinctive features is the fact that it can talk, it has a voice, and it can drive itself. And indeed, Hudson is an acronym that stands for, I'm going to do this without looking at the book, it stands for Heuristic Universal Driver with Sensory and Orbital Navigation.
Wow.
Does that
well done?
Right? I've got to check that. Heuristic Universal Driver with Sensory and Orbital Navigation. There you go.
Wow. That was incredible, Jack.
There you go.
You had that in you.
Nerd. Nerd. But in terms of, I mean, I can't compare. The problem is, I can't compare statistics with you. We can't have a top trumps game here where your car's this long and my car's that long, because I don't have those numbers for Hudson. It wasn't, at least in this book, and everywhere I went looking, I couldn't find those statistics. But I can tell you that although it can drive itself, it has a personality of its own. The other distinctive feature is, of course, the chameleon color. Because what's better than a pink Rolls Royce? It's a Rolls Royce that could be any color.
It's every color.
I am amazed by it's actually really clever because they come up with ways of incorporating it in the story. You know, I watched the episode 10 Top Pop last night of Terrahawks. Great episode, by the way.
Great choice.
So funny.
Lovely.
But they're able to use Hudson's like color changing capabilities as like a warning signal, without notifying the people inside the car who, you know,
right.
Plot of that episode is Stu Dapples is under Zelda's control and takes Kate Kestrel hostage. So yeah, that chameleon color is used very well, but also it works because Hudson basically becomes Kate Kestrel's car. It starts out as Neinstein's car, but Kate makes a lot more use of it. And Kate famously changes the color of her outfit more often than she changes her underwear, but that's sort of the point, I suppose.
It's the underwear part of the outfit.
I suppose it is. It probably all matches. Probably all the same color. But she changes the color of her outfit and her wig and everything else. And of course, Hudson can match that, which is just it doesn't do much to serve the story or anything, but
it's really charming.
It's just a nice, charming little touch, and it wouldn't have taken. It's really interesting, actually, from the effects point of view. They basically had all these different colored shells for Hudson that they would have just had to replace and swap out. But then they also had the one whenever it had to change color on screen, it had like this sort of reflective surface, and they would shine a brightly colored light at it and change the colors that way. Just really, really clever, really kind of a simple effect, but very, very effective.
Really well done.
Yeah. I mean, outside of the color, I will concede that Hudson's design is not as striking as Fab 1. What I will say is it looks more like a Rolls Royce. It looks more traditionally like a Rolls Royce, whereas Fab 1 comes along with its ridiculous length and width and its extra set of wheels and all this stuff. And it's like, yeah, it kind of looks... But yeah, it means that Hudson's design is not as memorable, but it makes up for it by having the color changing aspect and the voice and the self-driving and all of this sort of stuff.
Personality,
it has a personality about it, which I think is brought to life fantastically by Ben Stevens doing that particular voice. I think he does the posh chauffeur thing really well. Actually makes a nice sort of contrast to Parker, I think. It's almost like they looked at Hudson and went, okay, how can we make this as different from Fab 1 as possible? So they sort of scaled back on the gadgets and stuff like that and went more for the let's give this a personality, change the colors,
Right.
But yes, so Ben Stevens gives it this very posh voice, which is all contrasts nicely with Kate Kestrel again. It's just great. Just really, really fun. A good fun character, and it definitely has its practical uses, and it feels very special. I love the way we're kind of going on to our talking about our best moments here, I suppose. Was there anything before I do that? Was there anything about design that you wanted to question about Hudson? I want to give you the opportunity to argue with me.
Well, we could oh well. We could talk about weapons. Like, clearly Hudson is a bit lacking in that department as
doesn't need it. Doesn't need it.
You think it's a brain over brawn.
Talk his way out of any situation.
He's a smart car, so he doesn't need weapons.
Smart. Speaking of, sorry, no, I'm getting into best moments again, but I have to. 10 Top Pop, I think it's brilliant. The moment when Stu Dapples is like, okay, get out of the car, tell the driver to get out of the car. And so Hudson just not being able to be seen because there's a screen up in the car, opens the door and then just shuts the door again to give the impression of a driver getting out. The
It's
number
so
of ways they find of playing upon the driverless car thing is just very clever. Got to admire the script writing that went in there. But
yeah,
yes, I will agree. Yeah, weapons wise, not so good, but doesn't need him. Doesn't need him. Yeah.
There's a really clever bit where they're trying to. Kate needs to distract some dam workers. I can't remember the episode off the top of my head, but you'll think of it as I tell you.
I think is it the gun?
I think it is the gun. You're right.
Right.
Yeah, she needs to distract some dam workers, and that's people who are working on a dam. Just to be clear.
Yeah. Dam workers.
and Hudson actually creates a diversion by rear-ending someone.
Right.
And that's quite a memorable moment for Hudson. And I guess it plays into Terrahawks too, where you have the robot characters, the Zeroids, who are very character driven. So all of the vehicles in Terrahawks and the robots, there's sort of Hudson's sort of the bridge between those.
Yeah. Well, here's a fun thing that I read in the annual that I hadn't sort of I don't know if it's ever actually mentioned in the TV series. Might be mentioned in the audio series, but yeah, obviously there is the perch inside of Hudson, sort of in the front passenger seat, which I think is really fun. I love when Zero or 5 is sat up the front. But apparently the Silver Lady, you know, the little statuette that sits on the front of a Rolls Royce radiator wheel, the Silver Lady can retract to be replaced by a Microzoid, which has all the functions of a Zeroid.
I do not remember that.
Know that. I don't think that's in the TV show, but it is in the annual.
Fascinating.
Isn't that really fun? Just having a little
great.
Zeroid just on the front of the car as well. It's like,
yeah,
just clever. Just a nice little idea.
The Silver Lady on Fab 1 is a tracking device, I think.
That's true. That's true. I like that. And I will concede that is a clever use of that particular emblem. I think that's clever.
Yeah. What do you think of the design of Hudson's? So Hudson doesn't have a face per se, but he does have a little flashing light. What do you think of the design of that and sort of the interior of Hudson in general?
I like the interior layout. I think that's very comfortable and not very safe, admittedly. You know,
no safety belts.
No safety belts. Just sat around. You got a table. I think there's a table in the middle of it, or something like that. I can't quite work out the proportions. I think the interior suggests it's bigger on the inside,
right?
Appropriately enough. But yeah, all right. Hudson's face, which is sort of the flashing T. Yeah, I wouldn't have minded something with a little more expression, something more. It's along the lines of the Zeroids, but I wouldn't have minded having something a little bit more. But then again, I suppose the minimalism is kind of classy in a way. So I don't know. It
seems very along the lines of something like Knight Rider. Kit, the car from Knight Rider,
right?
Has you know, flashing lights and things as he talks.
Yeah.
So.
I was trying to think of actually thinking about it, that Neinstein obviously had a say in designing Hudson. And I think he very intentionally, and he says it in the first episode, Mary suggests that Hudson's a little bit like Sergeant Major Zero. And he goes, not like Zero. This machine has breeding or something like that in it.
Yeah.
So it's like he sort of intentionally designed Hudson to be the antithesis of Sergeant Major Zero. So from that point of view, the design of the face, for want of a better word, the flashing T, the fact it's so minimalist and doesn't have the flashing red lights that the Zeroids have, and the, you know, all that sort of stuff, I can understand why.
Very intentional choice.
That was the direction they went in. They were like, yeah, let's make it different. But
I love that Tiger's first impulse is to create a class hierarchy within his robot army.
I mean, he makes a lot of questionable choices throughout the series. That is definitely one of them.
What do our robots need? I know, a caste system.
Yeah.
This one's better.
Yeah. So yeah. And I think that the transition of sort of making Hudson Kate's car of choice, it does fit. I think it does fit better. Just because she does need to live this extra life of the famous pop star and everything. It's actually interesting, again, comparing Thunderbirds to Terrahawks a little bit. It's interesting that in Thunderbirds, the Rolls Royce is owned by the aristocrat. And that's the symbol of power and success there. In Terrahawks, it's owned by a pop star. And it fits just as well, but it shows a cultural shift that went on in the 80s. If you wanted to be so bold, you could make that jump of the idolization of celebrities and that sort of thing.
Very
becoming more prevalent. So
very astute thought. Yeah,
I know. It
really develops the character of Hudson, or FW Runkin, as he becomes towards the end of the show, as he becomes Kate's manager. It's really interesting because it sort of puts flesh on the bones of that idea of Kate being a pop star. It gives her someone to talk to, and adds a dimension to that where it's not just. I think Gerry says in that biography, we gave her these songs to sing because we thought it would be a good promotional gimmick, but it sort of slows down the drama for her to have to stop and sing a song. And that's not really the case once you get into it.
I disagree. I think it's what makes Terrahawks special, particularly later on, is that it builds up this little pocket world of Kate Kestrel going to Thunderbird Records, Stu Dapples, Chick King, Hudson as FW Runkin, Zeroid 55 as her sort of personal assistant. In the same way that over the course of Thunderbirds, Lady Penelope sort of becomes a character in her own right and starts to appear more frequently, and she becomes the driving force behind so many of those Series 2 episodes, like Alias Mr. Hackenbacker, Lord Parker's Holiday. Like they're Penelope-driven episodes. And I think the fact that the same thing happens in Terrahawks, where Kate Kestrel going to record her songs becomes sort of part of the story and something that Zelda, as the villain, starts to think she can manipulate, and that's her way in. I think that's great. I think it would be very boring if the whole show was just kind of this military operation, just going out and blowing up the bad guys all the time. I like that extra dimension that it gives the series. And Hudson, as Kate's manager, very, very clever, very integral part of that. Absolutely.
Definitely.
That's where I fall on that.
I love Hudson. I love Terrahawks, but now it's time to talk about what everyone's really here for, the best moments of Fab 1.
Okay. Well, so far, I think I'm winning, and I haven't had to do much to convince Ben on this debate, so that's great. But go on then. Yeah, best moments of Fab 1, because I think there are a few kind of really good.
There's a lot of standout moments. The rescue in The Perils of Penelope, where Parker pulls a door off its hinges. He could have just gotten out of the car and walked in and opened the door. Yeah. But no, for speed and to save us having a puppet walking, it shoots harpoons out the back of it to tear down the door. It's just a lovely moment. So many other great moments like that. Brink of Disaster, a chase scene with Lady Penelope that kind of feels a bit like a Lady Penelope comic come to life, because it's just her on the run from some bad guys, and she fights them off with her car, and it's a great opportunity to see what this car was capable of.
Yes, unfortunately, that's all it does, though, isn't it? It's just an advert for all of Fab 1's good features. It doesn't actually add much to the story. I'm sorry, Brink of Disaster really... Brink of Disaster really winds me up because it's some of the more egregious padding that was added to episodes to make them longer.
But as a feature of Fab 1, I mean, what we're talking about is Fab 1, not the episode as a whole.
Sure. Yeah.
Absolutely memorable moments for Fab 1.
Yeah,
of course, lots of great moments with the front-facing machine guns, notably in Trapped in the Sky. The first time we see that very large, I think it was actually a life-size grill that they built.
Yeah,
or if it wasn't life-size, it was certainly very close.
Yeah,
to have the unfolding radiator grill. The machine gun comes out and blows the Hood's car to smithereens.
Yeah,
even though he somehow survives. Iconic moment. Everyone I talk to about Thunderbirds, they remember moments like that. Thunderbirds are Go, a sort of questionable moral situation where that same weapon was used to apparently kill the Hood permanently. Sometimes causes a little debate in the fandom about whether or not that was the right thing to do. International rescue using lethal force, but that's a whole nother discussion for another time.
Yeah.
And
I will say it's surprising to me, thinking about that sequence, how the hydrofoils and Fab 1 going on water. For some reason, I always have it in my head that was like a permanent fixture, but it only really comes in later on. It's only in Lord Parker's Holiday and the movie, and that's it.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much. I do love Lord Parker's Holiday, where she just it's sort of an ultimate Lady Penelope moment, where it actually plays into the character as well, where she's not just going to make a call. She has to like go to a secure location to make a call. She has to get a clear signal. And so, rather than just like, drive on the road for a little ways until she's clear. Nope, she's going to drive off a pier, activate the hydrofoils and go out to sea to make her phone call.
Well,
and that sort of like over the top cheesiness is just great. It feels so 60s and so, I don't know, like old world Hollywood. It's like the sort of thing that would happen in any big budget, extravaganza of that time, whether it was James Bond or something else.
Yeah.
Just feels right.
I agree. And the comment from the drunk guy saying, I've heard of pink elephants, but a pink Rolls Royce driven by Lady Mary Antoinette is ridiculous.
That's so lovely. I love it very much.
Yeah. You think, are they going too far a little bit? And then you remember that Tony Barwick wrote that script, and you go, okay.
Yeah, Tony Barwick, also in Terrahawks, brings the humor. And his special quirky humor is just unforgettable.
Yeah.
Have I missed any key moments?
I enjoy some of the smaller moments, like 30 Minutes Afternoon, Fab 1 being stuck behind a truck, and the Penelope saying, "Well, we're late, Parker. Give him a toot." Right, milady. And it's this sort of, they make a spectacle out of beeping the horn. It's like not that special, but it's the contrast, I suppose, between this big ugly truck and Fab 1 trying to overtake it. It's lovely. And then obviously Penelope driving Fab 1 to the Bank of England in Vault of Death.
Right.
Not a scratch on it after all that.
No.
Got to give it some credit.
Unstoppable. Yeah.
Does it ever break down? Is there anything like that happens? I don't think so.
Ooh, I think it gets stuck in the imposters.
Yes, gets stuck in the mud.
In the mud, which is sort of feels out of character, weirdly, for it to be stuck in the mud.
But that's sort of the whole point, isn't it? It's that they're trying to make a point out of Penelope being out of place in that setting, and how Jeremiah Tuttle's like, "Oh, won't get very far in that there, fancy buggy," and all that sort of stuff. It's I think it's nice to call out the fact that Fab 1 is out of place in some settings.
Yeah.
Not very often, but just a few.
Not very often. I mean, even snow. I mean, they're prepared for snow.
Oh, yes, Thunderbirds 6, the
skiing.
skiing sequence. That is lovely.
Isn't it charming?
That is very nice. Yeah.
There's something about that era. I guess, when Gerry and Sylvia were getting ready to have a child, they started making these very sweet moments in in Thunderbird 6 and in Joe 90, like the balloon sequence in Joe 90.
Yeah.
Some of the most heartwarming, beautiful little scenes. There's Fab 1 skiing along in the snow. So charming.
Yeah. No, it is very nice. Yeah.
When you think about all that put together, Jack, how can you possibly come up with a list of Hudson's best moments?
I'll be honest,
how can it compare?
I did struggle a little bit just because I'm not as familiar with Terrahawks as I am with Thunderbirds.
All right, that's fair.
So there is that. I mean, I love Terrahawks and I have watched it a lot, but some of the Hudson moments do blend together. But I did think of a few. I love this, but they're more character moments because the character has dialogue, and has its own agency and can act on its own. So things like what I mentioned with Ten Top Pop, where he opens the door and shuts it again to suggest that there's a driver getting out. I think that's just really clever, very witty, just a great way around that situation. I actually enjoy Zero's finest hour, when all the Zeroids pile into Hudson, because he's sort of he's the only vehicle they have that they can get in subtly, and it can drive itself again, so that proves quite useful in that situation.
My head is being squashed.
Exactly. All the Zeroids pile inside Hudson, and then he just drives into the Overlander depot, and there's that great skid across the floor while he's in his camo. He's got his camo livery on, so just looks so cool. And you think this is a Rolls Royce here, but it's being used as like a siege weapon in this scenario. It's great. I think that's fantastic. So that was a very kind of great, memorable moment. But I enjoy things like is it My Kingdom for a Zeef, where they're stuck on the bridge and Lord Tempo is aging the bridge, so it's slowly starting to collapse, and you've got Hudson tipping over the edge, and just and you worry, you're concerned, because again, it's not just a car, it's a character. So when you're facing that danger, it's like, oh, Kate Kestrel's life is at risk, but also Hudson. Which I think is really sweet, that you're able to kind of feel for a car in this way. It's a character, it's a person. And on a similar note, I also enjoy Ugliest Monster of All with Yuri the Space Bear.
I was hoping you would bring this one up.
Yeah, Yuri's at Hawk Nest, and Neinstein is like, oh, get rid of that effing bear. I don't want to see it anymore. And he turns to Hawkeye, and I love how secretive that is, where Hawkeye has to take Yuri away to the Zoological Institute or something. Basically taking this space bear off to the zoo to get rid of him. So that Kate and Mary don't notice, because they're quite attached to Yuri. And so it's Hawkeye and Zero, I think, and Yuri are inside Hudson in the garage in the middle of the night, getting ready to take him away. And Yuri starts using his powers of telekinesis and basically starts damaging Hudson. And it's a really nice sort of comedy moment where Hudson suddenly, ooh, that rather hurts. Oh gosh, I'm in quite a lot of pain here. Just really stupid stuff, but great.
Very
great
cheeky.
Fun. Yeah, very cheeky.
Some cartoon sound effects.
There's a boing sound effect, and you're like, oh, I don't know quite what's happened to him. And later on, there's the fantastic operating sequence where Dr. Killjoy, one of the Zeroid doctor and the Zeroid nurse, are there. Hudson's got his bonnet, got his hood open, and they're sort of operating on him, but really they've just got electrodes kind of hooked up to him. But he's covered in cloth to make it look like an operating theater. They've even attached him to a drip, which is like engine oil. Genius. And
it's so silly.
Hudson,
it's wonderful.
Hudson starts to recover from the surgery and his engine starts roaring again. I just think that's so clever. So not necessarily like an exciting action sequence. There aren't too many of those with Hudson, but it's more of those little character moments. And as any situation where he's adopting the persona of FW Runkin is great fun, just because he's so oblivious to what it really means to be Kate Kestrel's manager. So anytime he has to have a phone conversation with Stu or anyone like that, it's always just baffling moment because he's a car. Why on earth would he know how to be a pop star's manager? So it never loses that grounded nature. I think that's just, it's really clever. So yeah, those would be some of my favorite Hudson moments, and I think they are quite different from favorite Fab 1 moments just because the nature of the thing is so different. Just really good fun.
I love the bit in My Kingdom for Azif as well. Sort of, I guess this is sort of a spoiler if you've not seen it. Before the situation with the bridge, Lord Tempo plays around with time a little bit, and the bridge ages, or he takes the bridge back to a time when it didn't exist. In any case, the bridge disappears.
Yes.
And Hudson radios a quick 1090, which is the emergency code, as they, desperately attempt to slow down, but they don't. They fall over the edge and they explode, and that's the death of Kate Kestrel in that timeline.
Yeah.
So he goes back and fixes it. And it's that sort of heroic moment where Hudson like very calmly sends the emergency code and then tries to stop but can't.
Yeah.
It's just, it really bonds you to him as a character.
Yeah.
To watch him, with his back against the wall, facing a challenge which he can't overcome.
Exactly.
It's just a nice character moment, as you say, and really lovely car.
Yeah. Which one would you rather take for a ride? We should think about little situations maybe that we might find ourselves in. So if you're just going for a nice Sunday drive, which would you rather sit in?
I think sit in?
Yeah, okay, imagine you've got either Hudson's going to drive itself or you've got Parker there to drive you.
Okay.
To be chauffeured around in. Which would you rather?
Yeah, like a Sunday afternoon kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think I would actually take Fab 1.
Okay.
I think I would take Fab 1 and bring like maybe a date and a picnic lunch. And just take Fab 1 out to the countryside.
God, imagine showing up for a date, like a blind date, and you turn up in your giant pink Rolls Royce.
Hello. So sorry I'm late. Please join me.
Oh, maybe don't press that button on the way in because you might fire the ejector seat or whatever. Yeah,
it's sort of Johnny English when you put it that way.
Yeah, I suppose they're both quite good about sort of. I was thinking about taxi. I've never been chauffeured around really, except in a taxi, and I'm the sort of person who I get into a taxi. I don't want to have a chat. I don't want to have a chat with the driver. I'm there because I have to be. I'm not choosing to be in a situation where I'm being driven around. And I like Parker is generally quite respectful and stays quiet while he's driving around. But Hudson, you could just probably switch off his voice box. I don't know. Maybe.
I don't know either. This is a good question. Can you manually drive Hudson?
Yes.
Does that happen? I don't remember.
Yeah, I think Neinstein drives him in gold. Yeah. It doesn't happen very often.
I'll have to go back and watch that again.
Yeah. It doesn't happen very often, but yes, he can be driven. Oh no, in Expect the Unexpected as well.
Right. Yeah.
Neinstein does get in the driver's seat. I'm not sure why. I'm not really sure what advantage that would give you.
Well, I think if I was going to go not for a leisurely Sunday date drive, but for a, let's go to a famous road in the world and take this car to its limits kind of a drive.
Something like the Indy 500, going around the Scottish Highlands or something like that.
Something like that. I would take Hudson because his camouflage ability would be extremely useful in that scenario. If you're, going 150 miles per hour along the road and you get spotted by a speed camera or the police or something like that, you can just change your color every so often.
Yeah. Oh wow, that's a fantastic moment that I had forgotten about with Hudson, where that whole chase through Badwater County, and they're looking for a blue Royce's Rolls and a red Royce's Rolls, and he just keeps changing color in order to deceive the police. Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic.
Brilliant moment.
Yeah. I mean, you wouldn't think there would be that many instances where a car changing color would be useful, but they find them. They do find them. It is great. Yeah.
Red,
I mean,
white, and
in terms of a car to drive, Hudson for sure. Purely from a practical point of view, it's far easier to drive a normal sized car with 4 wheels than it is to drive Fab 1 with its 2 front wheels, both of which turn. I remember we were talking about, this is a total tangent here, it's not even related to Rolls Royce, but when they built the 2004 movie Fab 1, which of course was a Ford, they had such a problem trying to build a car that where both sets of front wheels could turn together. And of course the turning radius of that thing was about 5 miles. Could not steer the darn thing. And I'm sure the same problem occurs with the 1966 Fab 1 that was built in real life. Crazy. That just I mean, I have to admit, great that they did build the real Fab 1. I have to give it that. I have to give it some points for that. The fact that it does really exist, and it's in a Noto museum in Miami, I think, at the moment. You can go and see Fab 1.
Yes.
You cannot do that with Hudson. And actually, that reminds me to go back and look at the story about Gerry and Rolls Royce and Hudson. I'm going to read this again from the biography. So
Please.
Some 15 years after Fab 1 had appeared in Thunderbirds, Gerry decided to bring another futuristic car of the same make to his latest series. He had the idea that Rolls Royce apprentices should design and build the model of what was to be named Hudson. He visited the company's training school, where he was shown into a large room, empty but for a small table and a few chairs in the center. Here, discussions got underway with a representative whose attitude was far from cooperative. I couldn't understand this, as I thought it would be an exciting project, one that the apprentices would enjoy and that would create a lot of publicity and goodwill for Rolls Royce. I couldn't understand why the reaction was so totally negative. This is Gerry, not having the easiest time at talking to Rolls Royce. The representative finally said, "I don't think you realize that it would cost several million to create a 1/3 life-size working engine for this model." At this point, Gerry nearly fell off his chair in disbelief. Gerry says, "How could anybody think that I would be daft enough to make such a proposal? I know that it costs 40 or 50 million to develop a new engine, let alone build a working miniature replica. But all we wanted was a fiberglass shell, wheels, and interior trim." And with that, the factory hooter sounded, and Gerry left the site, almost trampled underfoot by the homeward bound workforce. I suppose it was what you might call an opportunity missed.
Wow.
Yeah, so in the end, Space Models built the Hudson model and the shell and everything. It was still signed off by Rolls Royce, and obviously, as I mentioned, Rolls Royce still gave Gerry a Rolls Royce at that time as well. So the relationship was still good. But yeah, how funny that when the Rolls Royce representative heard, yeah, please build me a model of a Rolls Royce, he was thinking, engine. Need to build the engine.
I wonder if that was just the person that he talked to, was the engine person.
Right. Yeah, totally possible. Yeah, the wires probably got so crossed there. It was, clearly thought, well, if you're talking to me, yeah, you're probably talking about engines. Or maybe they believed that was how, the Thunderbirds miniatures and all the earlier miniatures and stuff. Maybe they thought, all these cars have got little engines in them.
Well, I was going to say, maybe this Rolls Royce executive attended a rare screening of The Investigator and saw a miniature car with an engine in it and was like, oh, we need to build one of those, but the Rolls Royce version of that.
Yeah.
And,
maybe.
Because Gerry, I guess, was daft enough to build a miniature car with an engine in it.
That's true. But it was like a lawnmower engine or something.
Right.
And to be fair, you say miniature. It's not that miniature, is it? The Investigator car is massive.
Was that built by Space Models as well? Do you know the Investigator car?
I don't know.
Because I know Space Models built quite a bit for the Anderson shows over the years.
Yeah.
Even back in Thunderbirds, a lot of that.
It would certainly make sense.
FAB 1 itself. FAB 1 itself might have been built.
Yes.
That's Space Models.
I think so. Yeah. This is where we have to say that this is an unofficial and totally poorly researched podcast, and you should not get your information exclusively from us. You should do your own research.
Please do fact check us.
Yes,
that's very much appreciated.
Yeah. Oh, we do.
That was a lovely story. Thank you for sharing that.
It is a really nice story, and I just love the idea of Gerry Anderson turning up to Rolls Royce and asking, "Can you build us a model, please?"
There's
a certain simplicity, charming simplicity to the whole thing.
Yeah.
You just sort of wouldn't, I don't feel like you would get that now. I don't know.
No, there would be like a cadre of lawyers who actually talk to each other.
Right. And, well, I mean, it happened with the 2004 live action movie. Rolls Royce said, no, we're not interested, which is just baffling. You think Fab 1 is as you said, Fab 1, one of the most famous TV cars, and certainly one of the most famous Rolls Royces ever put to screen.
Yeah.
They say now.
Why did they pass on it? Do you know?
Nobody knows to this day why exactly. Some people probably assumed the design just wasn't going the way that they would have wanted it to go.
They didn't have enough control.
Yeah, probably didn't have enough control. It could also be similar to that story about building Hudson. They might have just completely misunderstood the brief and thought, wait, you want us to build a full... Well, we can't build... Like, what? What are you talking about? They probably didn't understand it at all. They probably turned around and said, no, you can't build a real Fab 1.
Interesting.
Ford were a little bit more up for it, I suppose. Yeah,
Ford is very interested in product placement in films, and the Thunderbirds 2004 film is no exception to that.
No exception whatsoever.
Yeah. Now, something we should talk about with respect to Rolls Royce and their brand and how they like to be represented in media. Yeah. There's a story that the Rolls Royce, and maybe you can tell me where this story comes from, or if I'm imagining it, or what the deal is with it. There's a story that they gave permission to use the Rolls Royce logo and model.
Yeah.
The iconic silver lady and everything. Because they, on certain conditions, and one of them was that they didn't want to use any nicknames for Rolls Royce. Yeah. Like the Roller or the Rolls, they're not fond of that. It should always be referred to as the Rolls Royce.
Yes.
But
yes, I've also heard that story.
I don't know where that story comes from, but it seems to be contradicted in Terrahawks, certainly.
Terrahawks, yes. Maybe they eased up on it a little bit. Yeah. Because I feel like it says my roller, my Rolls Royce, yeah.
My roller. But also I think in the Mighty Atom,
Yes, Penelope
Lady
does
Penelope.
refer to it as the Rolls.
So, what's the deal with this story? Is it apocryphal? Do we know? Do we?
It could be. It might have been. Maybe they heard it in the Mighty Atom and thought, "Well, we don't like that. Could you stop doing that, please?"
I see.
Or it could be that they only saw Trapped in the Sky as like a test screening and were like, "Yeah, we're happy with how you're portraying that. You can go." I can't imagine an executive at Rolls Royce was sitting down to watch every episode of Thunderbirds and approve the use of their brand. Maybe they were, but it seems unlikely to me. So I think it was probably something that was sort of a declaration that was made from the outset, but I don't know how strictly anyone was checking that was being followed. And I think by and large, I can't think of too many other instances where they slip out of calling it the Rolls Royce.
It's hard to imagine that happening today, where you have a deal with a brand. Like, say you had a deal with Coke, where you were only referring to them as Coca-Cola, and then in one episode you referred to them as Coke.
Yeah.
That would
you wouldn't get away with it.
You wouldn't get away with that. There would be a breach of contract, and it would be all sorts of problems, headaches.
I don't know Rolls Royce well as a brand. Funnily enough, I'm not really in their target audience.
Are you not?
Well, rather,
you're not in their
balance. My bank balance isn't in their target audience.
You're not in their tax demographic.
No, funnily enough, no. But if I were them, I would be sensible and ease up on that rule a little bit nowadays and lean into because it's part of their brand really at this point, is to call it a roller or a Rolls or whatever. So I get it. But yeah, I can imagine in the 60s, probably a little bit stricter about it because they had their clientele, and people like Gerry Anderson aspired to be a Rolls owner. That was it was a status symbol at that time in a way that it probably isn't so much anymore. No, I'm not a car expert, but I imagine there are
sociology expert.
No, but I imagine there are different brands of car. Like if you were going to make Fab 1, if Fab 1 was a totally new idea, would it be a Rolls Royce today?
Ooh. And if not, what would it be? Do you know what I mean?
Well,
What would be a substitute for what the Rolls Royce represented in the 60s?
Yeah.
Hard to imagine.
A Bentley? I think they did, for the 2004 movie, did consider it being a Bentley.
Yeah.
I think there were designs done.
An option, for sure.
Yeah.
Any of those kind of, high-priced cars, luxury automobiles would be options.
Maserati.
A Maserati, a Lamborghini.
Yeah. But it's a different vibe, isn't it?
It is. Those are more like supercars.
I can't imagine. There aren't that many cars that you would be chauffeur driven in. Maybe like a Mercedes.
Oh, yeah.
Mercedes has sort of retained that kind of image.
Mercedes has
had for a long time.
BMW, I feel like used to maybe, but not so much anymore.
Yeah.
They've sort of established themselves as a driver brand.
Yeah.
Where you have a relationship with the car. That's sort of the way they present it.
Definitely.
Yeah, I don't know.
If you buy the car, you want to be the one driving it, I suppose. That's the idea.
Perhaps.
Which, on that topic, we've talked about a real life Fab 1, but obviously real life Hudsons are sort of starting to happen because driverless cars
in more ways than one
are a thing, and smart cars that can talk to you, I imagine, are a thing. Yeah.
Siri in your car.
Crazy, right?
Yeah. And a couple of years ago, BMW came out with a sort of pixel wrap that was like a LED wrap that could go around their car and could make it change color. Now,
wow,
the color changing wasn't fully functional in the way that Hudson's was. It was sort of like you can be black, white, or several shades of gray. So it wasn't like a multicolored wrap. It was just sort of like black and white, but it could do like patterns and things. So you could do like rippling effects going up and down your car.
Wow.
Or like leaves falling was one of the demonstrations that I saw.
Cool.
So look that up after the podcast.
I will. That's amazing. I had no idea that was a thing. That's incredible.
The BMW changing color car.
Yeah. There are some practical limitations to that as well. Like you can't drive. You would have to enforce certain laws against using that because you don't want to give people epileptic seizures and stuff driving along the motorway, constantly pressing the button to change the color of your car.
I mean, if it was me, I would just be screening episodes of Thunderbirds.
What, on the side of your car?
On the side of the car as I drive down the road.
Wow. Oh, that's really advanced. I bet you could do that anyway. Just hang a flat screen TV out the side of your car.
Yeah. Or one of those trucks that's like an advertising billboard.
Yeah.
Drive along and play an episode of your favorite TV show.
Yeah.
Why not?
Isn't that funny how Fab 1 we kind of look at and go, yeah, there's no modern equivalent to that now. Like those core ideas of a classy, chauffeur-driven, impressive, posh large posh car. Not really a thing anymore. Hudson, on the other hand, those principles are all things that are now on the market. I'm not sure about the color changing so much, but certainly the self-driving and things like that. That's all. Yeah, that's a thing. I think that's
sort of come true.
Fantastic. Yeah.
A lot of those like chauffeur-driven vehicles now are somewhat more militarized, where you see a lot more like SUVs that are bulletproof.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. That's
I suppose Fab 1 was doing that.
So there's perhaps that's the legacy of Fab 1 is the Cadillac motorcade.
Right. Yeah, I suppose so.
The bulletproof glass.
Yeah. Well,
security features.
So I think overall, categorically, which is the better car? Which car do you prefer? For any reason, which car do you prefer?
Final conclusions. What do we think?
Yeah.
I'm gonna say Hudson. I'm gonna break ranks. I'm gonna change sides in the war of nerves. I like Hudson much better. I just think it's an underrated part of Terrahawks. It's a strong character. It's a great voice by Robbie/Ben Stevens. Just a great car and a great character. And now that we've had this conversation, I'm going to go back and watch more Terrahawks because I just love it so much.
Right.
It's definitely, if you've never given Terrahawks a chance, if you came here for Fab 1 and you don't know Hudson, you gotta get to know him because he'll win your heart over for sure, just like he did mine.
Yeah. I have to say I'm in the same camp. I think Hudson excites me more as an idea. I think Fab 1 obviously has a status just because it's associated with Thunderbirds and Lady Penelope, and we can't really take that away from it.
Absolutely.
But there is an element that it was recycling the James Bond thing of having all the gadgets in the car. It's just kind of doing the same thing as that. Hudson feels totally unique. You mentioned Knight Rider, but
certainly by the end of the show,
by
the end of the show, Hudson develops he's completely unique. I think maybe in the early days it was sort of like, well, this is just the 80s version of Fab 1, but he grows and continues from there. Whereas Fab 1 sort of stays. It is iconic right out of the gates in Trapped in the Sky, and it stays the same throughout.
Yeah. It develops a few extra gadgets, but its function in the series remains consistent. Yeah. So
whereas Hudson just took off.
Yeah.
As it grew.
Definitely. One thing I can't believe I haven't talked to you, but talking of living cars. This is a topic that you know a lot about, and I know next to nothing about. So I wanted to ask you about Hudson in relation to Herbie.
Herbie the Love Bug from the Disney franchise.
Right. In terms of timing and things like that, where does that fit in? I honestly know next to nothing about it, but I know you've got fantastic video on your YouTube channel.
Yes, go subscribe to youtube.com/@cinemarionette. That's cinema and marionette put together. I did an essay on there about Herbie the Love Bug and why I think he's a puppetry character. Yeah. Herbie, the first Love Bug movie came out in 1968.
Okay.
So it would have been a couple years after Fab 1 and quite a bit before Terrahawks. But there are a few other living car things, mostly in horror. So there's a horror film called The Car. That's about a car killing people that's possessed by a demon, I think. And there's the movie Duel, which is a Steven Spielberg film. That's really not about a living car, but a car kind of personified as a monster. Okay. A lot of people think it's the prototype for Jaws.
Okay.
That movie.
Right.
A man being pursued by a semi-truck.
Yeah.
And a few others. John Carpenter's Christine, based on the novel by Stephen King. So yeah, lots of living car tropes. None of those are robotic though. I think that would have come along later. Not sure where that trope begins exactly.
Interesting. But Simpsons Clips 24 mentioned Brum. Yes, big part of my childhood.
Brum. Oh, thank you for that. Love Brum.
Yeah. Well, speaking of, let's have a look at some more viewer comments actually, because I did put the question out on social media. What do people prefer, Fab 1 versus Hudson? And
let's see who wins that race.
Yeah. Well, Countdown to Zero says, this is great. I think Fab 1 is the Fab 1. That's very clever.
That is great. I see what you did there.
Fab 1 is the Fab 1. Simpsons Clip 24 says on Blue Sky says, as much as I like Fab 1, I do think she is overrated in some respects. Now, Hudson, on the other hand, there's a car of a different color, if you get my drift. All these punny people on social media. Okay. Philip Cully says that Hudson was one of those things that didn't feel like it had a real purpose. It started as 9 Stars transportation and then ended up driving Kate Kestrel back to her house and playing as her manager for another repetitive stewed apple scene. Despite this, I like Hudson, but at the end of the day, it doesn't have a chance against the iconic Fab 1. One of the most well-known and well-loved cars on TV. I'm not sure chronologically where it compares to the infamous Aston Martin DB5 from Goldfinger, but they must be almost contemporaneous. Nice word, contemporaneous.
Contemporaneous is a great word.
Yeah. Nick James Thorne just says Fab 1. Good to make your vote
someone who
clear.
Knows what they want to say.
Fab 1. Les Paul Davis says, has to be Fab 1. It embodies the retrofuturism looks so well with its bubble canopy and mad back to front 6-wheel layout. Plus, it's got machine guns, a smoke screen, skis, and a hydrofoil. Years before Bond cars had anything similar. Credit to Rolls Royce at the time for letting APF use the name and Spirit of Ecstasy, which is more than can be said for modern BMW era Rolls. And then Penguin Made of Dynamite says, I like both, but it's got to be Fab 1 all the way for me. So there you go.
Nice comments. I forgot that Rolls Royce was owned by BMW. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, well, that probably feeds into what we were talking about before, where it's all the status and everything has changed slightly. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
But there we go. That was
ironically
discussion.
BMW owns Mini too. So Gerry Anderson, if that happened to Gerry Anderson today, if he traded a Rolls Royce for a Mini, he'd be just the same
like for
manufacturer.
Yeah. Isn't that funny? But anyway, there you go. That was our little discussion about Fab 1 versus Hudson. Rolls Royce, the Battle of the Rollers. I thought that was great fun. I really enjoyed doing that.
I enjoyed that too. Thank you, Jack.
Yeah. No, thank you, Ben. Thank you all very much for listening and watching the Security Hazard Show. Broadcast live every Wednesday, 6 p.m. UK time, youtube.com/Jack Noel, make sure you're subscribed so that you can keep up to date with all the videos and security hazard minis and the podcast and everything that's going up on YouTube on a weekly basis. There's lots and lots and lots of stuff there for you to enjoy. If you are listening to us on a podcast platform, somewhere like Spotify or Apple Podcasts or things like that, please rate and review us, because it helps us to climb up those charts and hopefully find a new audience. Ben would really like you to rate 5 stars. Apparently that's important.
So important.
Do we want 1-star reviews, or do we want people keeping the 1-star reviews themselves?
Oh, yeah, just keep that to yourself. You can write in and tell us, or tell us to our face, but don't put it on our our podcast page, please.
Yeah, but there you go. Okay, so 5-star reviews, please. Let us know.
Wait. I want more, Jack. I want even more. How can we provide them with more?
Patreon?
Well, it has to be through our Patreon page. You guessed it. You want to support us? If you enjoy the show, go over to patreon.com/securityhazard. For a very minimal monthly amount, you can get access to all of our exclusive videos, some audio commentaries. We did one that's just gone up this week for Trapped in the Sky, but not Trapped in the Sky like you're thinking about Trapped in the Sky. A very special version of Trapped in the Sky that you won't want to miss. You won't see that content anywhere else. It's very affordable, but if you can't give, then you can still support us by subscribing to the show, and we appreciate your support however you're able to give it to us. We're very grateful. Thank you.
Very, very grateful indeed. Yes. And everything else, go to securityhazard.net. That's your one-stop shop for social media links, for blog posts, Space Precinct blog posts still coming out every single week. If you're interested in hearing what I think about Space Precinct, that's been a journey.
What's coming up next, Jack?
Coming up next is I'm actually really excited for this one. This week will be Enforcer, episode 3 in the production run, and it's underrated. I will say that it's an underrated episode. So yeah, head over to securityhazard.net for everything you might need there. Ben, where can people find you?
Well, as mentioned briefly earlier, I'm on YouTube at Cinemarionette. I'm also Cinemarionette on Twitter. You can see a very funny Tony Christie joke that I made on there. It's also
I really enjoyed that.
It's also on Blue Sky, where I'm Ben Wolf Page. And if you want to know about anything else that I'm doing, including my Starfleet blog, you can find all that on benwolf.page.
Absolutely. Yeah, Ben's YouTube channel, I've said this before, but Ben's YouTube channel, Cinemarionette, is well worth taking a look at. There's some really just fun tangents of puppetry there that you just totally unique and very, very informative. I always learn something, either when I talk to you or when I watch one of your videos. I'm always learning. I feel so inadequate by comparison.
That's great. I'm like the broccoli of Super Marionation puppetry websites.
But look at you, you're sat there in your personal library. You're there. Oh, you look so esteemed and just,
Yes,
you look like
no less.
Yeah, with your pearls and your Rolls Royce chat. I don't know.
What are we
I've
going to
actually
do?
just changed my mind. I've decided I don't like it.
All right, well, go unsubscribe. Go unsubscribe to Cinemarionette.
Oh dear, but that was it. That was it for today's show. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and we will see you next week. Bye for now.
Thanks, bye.